Good morning and good afternoon, everyone, wherever you are in the world, and welcome to our webinar. My name is Nicolas Carnero, Food APAC Director at BSI, and I'm really pleased to be with your host for the event today. The speakers and I will try to reply to a question on how to kickstart our journey towards net zero. But prior to that, I will do a little bit of housekeeping. If you have any, so we have not started to record, so if you can't hear me or see me properly, please use the Q&A chat box and ask a question regarding that issue, and someone from BSI Asian will reply to you, will do their best to help you. If you have an issue to understand my accent, I'm sorry, but we can't do anything about that. We have, at the end of the presentation, a panel discussion and a Q&A. So if you have any questions, please use the Q&A box all along these presentations, and we will do our best to reply to these questions at the end of the session. If we don't have enough time, be ensured that we will come back to you with an answer. Without any further ado, I would like now to introduce Emmanuel Hervé, the Managing Director of Asian. Unfortunately, Emmanuel wasn't here. He's unable to be with us today, but he has recorded a short welcoming video clip. Emmanuel.
Dear guest, honored guest, fellow speakers, I would like to welcome you to this BSI webinar, which hopefully will help you better understand how to kickstart your journey towards net zero. As you all understand, and while 58% of CEOs still admits to greenwashing, the emphasis on sustainability has never been greater. The impacts on climate change are already being felt around the world, and many organizations are now starting their journey towards net zero as they realize that acting green is now a must-have and no longer a nice-to-have. It is true that securing sustainability and building organizational resilience requires commitment to a complex, challenging, and focused improvement journey. Many organizations and governments are now asking themselves where to start and how to ensure that the ratio of cost-benefit is retained, how to maintain today's standards of living while preparing for a better future. The purpose of this webinar is to bring some light on the path your organization may wish to take, how to ensure that your productivity is maintained, while progress towards carbon neutrality is being made. You will hear from our guest speakers and BSI thought leaders on best practices and insight, as well as their experiences on options available to you. We shall also ensure that your key questions are answered during the panel discussion. I hope you find this webinar insightful. Enjoy.
Thank you very much, Emmanuel. I would like now to welcome our first speaker, Wan Yang, the Head of Sustainability Solutions at BSI APAC. Wan Yang has over 20 years of experience in sustainability. His expertise focuses on climate change, energy efficiency, and environmental protection. His last job was with United Nations Development Programme, UNDP, and oversaw the implementation of SDGs in China and across the Asia Pacific. Prior to that, Wan Yang used to be China country directors at several international environmental NGOs and led 100+ projects on policy research, pilot and demonstration, and so forth. Please welcome Wan Yang.
Thank you, Nicholas. It's a great honor to deliver the speech to all of you, wherever you are. I'm based in Beijing, and I guess people are from ASEAN countries and also Australia and other parts of the world. I think the good thing about the pandemic is we have been very comfortable to attend such kind of event online, right? So that's a good thing about the pandemic. And everyone knows Nokia, right? At its peak, Nokia reached more than around like 73% market share in cell phone. Under Nokia's absolute dominance, the first iPhone was produced in 2007. In 2010, Nokia's market capitalization reached more than 200 billion euros. Do we know after how many years? I know we all know that Nokia was finally acquired by Microsoft. But do you know how many years after their peak? Only after 3 years. Microsoft acquired Nokia at a price of 5.44 billion euros in 2013. So don't misunderstand. I have my full respect to Nokia. I think they are still doing a very good job in terms of ICT sector, right? But in terms of the cell phone, I think they have had a very hard time. At the press conference after the contract signing ceremony, Nokia's CEO was very emotional and said, "We didn't do anything wrong, but somehow we lost." What happened? Whoever come from big companies or small and medium-sized enterprises today, I think, should seriously think about it. If we are not sensitive to the new trend, if we are not able to embrace the changes and be innovative, people making things happen, if we cannot embrace the changes, I think we won't have a future, right? We need to be innovative. So today in my lecture, I will mainly talk about the trend, okay? At BSI, we always use a classic analogy to urge ourselves to lead the changes. People making things happen, right, are drivers. So the drivers basically hold the wheel and take the whole organization to the right direction, they think, right? And people watching what is happening are passengers, right? And also, unfortunately, there are also a group of people who, wondering what has happened. Those people are often, insensitive and are often associated with roadkills. So we don't want to be the last group of people. We want to be the driver, or at a minimum, we should be the passengers, right? So today, the title of my presentation is Drive the Changes for a More Sustainable World. I think there are 4 sections in my presentation. First, I will explain the basics about climate change and net zero. In the second part, I will briefly go through the global efforts to address climate. I think in ASEAN and Australia, many companies are either suppliers of multinational companies or exporters relying on international market, right? So I would like to quickly introduce European Union's carbon border adjustment mechanism. In section 3, how carbon neutrality will transform our society, and also I will introduce the corporate roadmap to net zero. Last, I will quickly introduce BSI a little, okay? So first, let's look at the big picture. Nowadays, there are many concepts here and there. I will explain some of them today. On the top of it is climate change. The theme of today's webinar is net zero. So what do we mean by net zero? Okay. First, what is greenhouse gas effect? I don't think we need to go deep into sciences. I will just very quickly go through the basic concept of climate change with you. If you came from villages or you are familiar with gardening, you will probably know greenhouse. Or in summer, you get into your car in the parking lot. How do you feel? Hot, right? Why? Because the heat is captured in your greenhouse gas, in your greenhouse or in your car, right? Some gases like carbon dioxide wrap up the earth like a greenhouse and make our planet become warmer and warmer. It's the greenhouse effect. And we call these gases greenhouse gases, okay? Now let's have a quick review of high school chemistry. This picture listed major greenhouse gases. Among them, carbon dioxide and methane make the most contributions to global warming. I also want to introduce another conception called global warming potentials. For example, methane's GWP, global warming potential, is 28, meaning 1 kilo methane's global warming impact is equivalent to 28 kilos of carbon dioxide. The GWP of SF6, you see the purple circle over here, is 22,800. That means the contribution of 1 kilo SF6 to global warming equals to 22,800 kilos of CO2. Though there is only a little SF6 in our atmosphere, but the gas is far more powerful than carbon dioxide to cause global warming. Okay. I'm sure there are still many people who don't really trust the theory of climate change. No matter what, science is science. Let's look at the 6th IPCC assessment report. The evidence, I think, is very strong. From the left panel, we can see that in the past 170 years, from 1850 to 2020, the temperature change against decade average has been rising very sharply, right? Over here, you see. Panel B shows that in the past 170 years, if without human behavior, you see the green line, natural drivers didn't, change the temperature much. See the green, but with human activities, you see the brown line over here. But with human activities, temperature change has been rising sharply. It is also consistent with what has been observed. Okay, so where do the carbon emission come from? In all the countries or regions, power sector contributes the largest volume. In China, more than half of the emission comes from power sector. In Japan, 49. In EU, 33. Right. So China's power sector accounts for approximately half of the emission because 73% of China's electricity comes from coal-fired power plants. I don't know, what happened to Japan, because Japan also has around a 50% emission comes from power sector. ASEAN, I think ASEAN countries looks a little like China, depending more on coal-fired power plant. Electricity generation has grown rapidly from 1990s to right now, and also in future to 2035. Electricity generation increased by an average of 7.5% per year. This growth was largely based on fossil fuels, which generated 79.4% of ASEAN electricity over here in 2013. So ASEAN reliance on fossil fuel, I think, is also expected to continue in the future. Coal is abundant in ASEAN, mainly produced by which country? By Indonesia, right? One of the world's major coal producers and exporters. Thus, coal is the natural choice for the region to fulfill the sharp projected increase in economic growth and energy needs. Okay. Here are the impacts of climate change. The connection between human behaviors and climate change has been scientifically proved. I listed some of the consequences here. You can have a quick look at it. I think countries like Indonesia, Singapore, the Philippines, Hong Kong, Taiwan, New Zealand, and Japan are very vulnerable under climate change. With sea level rise, many islands will disappear. It's not hundreds of years away. It could be 50 to 80 years away. Meaning our grandchildren will be in big trouble if we don't do anything about it. Okay. Okay. So, in view of the catastrophe climate change will bring, we come up with a conception called net zero. So that's the key message of today's webinar, right? So the first question I want to ask to all our participants for today's webinar. So what is net zero? Okay, zero emission of greenhouse gas, or achieving a balance, or zero air pollution. Please put your answer and select the answer. Then we give you like 30 or 40 minutes, 30 or 40 seconds. Then we will explain. Okay. All right. All right. Okay, we got the result of participants, the selection of the participants. 79% selected answer B, choice B, and 21% select number 1. So the correct answer is net zero is not about zero emission of greenhouse gas. No matter what, an individual, an organization, a company, we have to, as human beings, we have to emit some amount of greenhouse gas into the atmosphere. So by net zero, we mean achieving a balance between the carbon emitted into the atmosphere and the carbon, removed from it. Okay, so basically, it's you emit the greenhouse gas, then you remove it, and the amount of removal and emission equals. So that will be the final result will be 0 into the atmosphere. Okay, so in section 2, we will talk about what actions have been taken to combat climate change globally, and specifically, I will briefly introduce EU's carbon border adjustment mechanism. Now let's look at the actions we have taken. In general, there have been 3 phases for international community to work together on climate change. The first phase is called Kyoto Protocol. In Kyoto Protocol, countries agreed in establishing a flexible market mechanism and develop clean development mechanism, CDM. Okay, CDM is a great design and laid a foundation for most of the carbon trade scheme, such as EU ETS or China's carbon market or US regulatory credit system. Under CDM, every country has a certain limit of carbon emission. Okay, if a country has to break the limit, they have to purchase extra carbon allowances from other countries. So Kyoto Protocol is valid until 2010. So in Copenhagen Convention, countries discussed how to renew Kyoto Protocol or maybe reach a new agreement. But it's Copenhagen Convention, it's a disappointing event. Countries debated and disagree with one another. Despite that, at Copenhagen, we all stressed CBDR, that means common but differentiated responsibilities. And we also decided on the goal by 2020. So the last phase started from 2016 to now through Paris Convention. So in 2015, countries reached an epoch-making Paris Agreement. Under Paris Agreement, countries do not emit by allowance. Instead, they set targets by themselves. It's called nationally determined contributions, NDCs. Okay, many countries, then claim their goals for carbon peak and carbon neutrality. The biggest achievement, I think, countries made through Paris Agreement is that we set the goal of 2 Celsius degree and 1.5 Celsius degree. So this slide is about the Paris Agreement. We can see the 5 key achievements. And the right graph lists some good results under the Paris Agreement. I will not, explain, describe each item, in details. But that the message is that Paris Agreement is a milestone agreement or collective action taken by all countries and human beings. This is a map displaying the years for carbon neutrality commitment of different countries. In general, Europe is more advanced, more proactive than any other countries. For example, Norway, they committed to reach carbon neutrality by 2030. Finland by 2035. Oh, here, this is the wrong number. UK, United Kingdom by 2050. Japan 2050, US, United States 2050, China 2060, and Australia, I think 2050 as well. India 2070. Now let's have a close look at one of the important EU's regulations, Carbon Border Adjustment Mechanism. In essential, CBAM is a type of carbon tariff. Last year, the European Commission proposed to put a carbon price on imports of certain products, so that ambitious climate action of certain, of Europe does not lead to carbon leakage. I will explain what carbon leakage is. This will, prevent other countries from taking advantage of their lower cost of carbon reduction to export high emission products to EU markets. Okay, so what do we mean by carbon leakage? In some countries, the cost for carbon reduction is more expensive, right? In EU, the carbon reduction cost is higher than other countries. So some EU companies may transfer their production to other countries with laxer regulations. This will increase the emission of other countries. For example, carbon leakage will compromise the effectiveness of EU's climate policies. Let me raise an example. For example, the total cost of producing a ton of steel in EU is 1,000 euros, 200 among which is the cost to reduce carbon emission, right? Per EU's regulations, they have to do that. While in Turkey, their production cost is 600 euros. I just use it as an example. It might not be true. Because they don't do much to reduce emission, right? What will happen then? First, imported steel from Turkey will be more competitive than EU steel, right? In terms of price. Second, EU's strict policy for emission reduction would essentially, incentivize steel production in Turkey, generating even more carbon emission. Third, less advanced countries will lose interest in reducing emission. And last, EU steel mills will have to move production line out of EU to other countries, which will have a negative impact on EU's economy, right? So this is basically the rationality of CBAM. Here are some specifics about the regulation. I don't want to explain them in details. You can check them out on EU's website. It's all over there. According to the latest revision, CBAM has a 4-year transitional period of time from 2023 to 2026. On January the 1st, 2027, it will be officially effective. The original draft plans to cover 5 sectors: cement, iron, steel, aluminum, fertilizer, electricity. The latest version passed by European Parliament, added 4 more sectors: hydrogen, plastics, ammonia, organic chemicals. Okay, so it's possible that more sectors will be covered in future. We don't know about that. So I suggest companies in either in ASEAN countries or in Australia, in APAC, basically, we need to pay a lot of attention, close attention to CBAM, because a lot of our business rely on EU market, right? So if one day we will be charged, with extra tariff that will add our cost, will reduce our competitiveness. So basically, some suggestions for us to take, some measures for us to take. First, we need to make preparation for carbon data disclosure of our products, right? And also, we need to take measures to reduce carbon footprint of our key products. So 2 suggestions for you. In section 3, I will talk about how carbon neutrality will transform our society. Actually, it is transforming our society. It's not a future tense. It is present tense. And also, I will introduce a little bit about corporate roadmap to net zero. Why carbon neutrality will be a blue ocean? Let's focus on from a business perspective. We talk too much about how why it really matters, because it will protect our Earth, our planet. Right now I'm going to talk about from pure business perspective. Carbon neutrality, remember this statement. It is the most certain goal of human society, a long-lasting journey, and attracts the largest investment in human history. It is very certain because if we don't do it, we'll be doomed, right? Many countries committed to achieve carbon neutral by 2050, Australia by 2050, China by 2060, India by 2070. So the journey will last at least 30 to 50 years. In essential, carbon neutrality is not just about protecting our planet, I think. It's also a new industrial revolution. In human history, all the previous industrial revolutions are boosted by energy advancement, right? And upgrade. The first one is fueled by coal and powered by steam engine. The second one is fueled by petroleum and electricity. And now we are transiting from fossil fuel to renewable energy. So carbon neutrality will be a game changer. It's a little like the digital technology. It will transform the existing industrial sectors. For example, it will change how we produce iron steel, how we grow palm oil, how we build our cars, build our houses, how we grow crops, etc. Right? Meanwhile, it creates new business like wind turbine, PV panel production, batteries, and of course, carbon accounting, carbon trade, and carbon financing. Correct? I suggest we all take action sooner than later. We can predict that there will be stricter legal and compliance requirements, not only from government, but also from multinational companies. Most of them are our buyers. Companies who can't meet the requirements will be removed from MNC's supply chain list. Globally, countries and companies who can develop with more efficiency and less emissions will become competitive. For example, in some of the international bidding, bidders who can demonstrate less carbon emission may win, sometimes even with a higher price. Okay, so also the prolonged energy crisis is urging us to get rid of reliance on fossil fuel. A cleaner and stable energy system based on renewable energy needs to be created as soon as possible. At last, climate behavior also has become a reputation. Even petroleum and coal companies need to do something to make themselves look better to the public and to their investors as well, right? So carbon neutrality is becoming a blue ocean full of business opportunities. Now let's see how it's transforming our society. Carbon neutrality, will change many sectors fundamentally. The first one is power sector. Solar and wind power will be more popular. Heavy industries will be transformed profoundly. We'll have more green buildings. Fossil fuel vehicles will come to an end, replaced by EVs, right? In countries like Denmark, fossil fuel vehicles will 100% phase out by 2030. In Europe, the time is 2035. No fossil fuel cars should be sold in Europe by 2035. China now has witnessed an EV penetration rate by 20% by the end of 2021, and expects 75% by 2030. Agriculture will take a new shape. I'm sure there will be more and more needs for carbon neutral in agriculture and food sector, like sustainable palm oil, winery, dairy, right? New materials. The need for low and zero carbon is spurring the development of new materials, such as bio-based materials, more efficient coating for PV panels, and more advanced material for batteries, etc. And CCUS, at last, negative technologies or carbon removal, like carbon capture, utilization, storage, will be developed. Okay, to summarize, our path to carbon neutrality is essentially an energy and industrial revolution propelled by technical innovations and advancements. The transformation of our society will be fundamental and profound. Okay? In a nutshell, there are 9 measures we can take to achieve, net zero. So it gives us a very simple framework to think about our plan to net zero. First is to build the governance and structure and strengthen the culture in your company. Then you need to measure and set goals. Then you need to streamline your production process, improve energy efficiency. You reduce, reuse, and recycle and reuse the materials, and use renewable energy as much as possible. Okay, and at last we need to offset, and finally we need to adjust our product strategy. Okay, so these are some ideas for a company to take action to achieve net zero. So next, I will ask two questions. So you may tell me, has your organization started your journey towards net zero? I'll give you 20 seconds to answer this question. Okay. Can we see the result of the polling? All right, 70% has started their journey. That's good. Congratulations. You have been taking actions. I think that's pretty good. And further, please tell me at what stage is your journey towards net zero? 20 seconds again. Okay, can we see the result? 20% not started, 26% still in planning. Gap analysis 12%, implementation 14%. Okay, so it seems to be equally distributed in different stages of the net zero journey. Okay, so I think the message is I urge all companies in APAC, also maybe globally, to take actions immediately. So first of all, you need to understand why you want to take action. Then you need to do the planning and measure, right, to set goals. So okay, so I will give you an idea. This is a list of top brands who make commitment for carbon peak and carbon neutrality. So far, more than 1,600 companies have participated in Science-Based Target Initiative, SBTI, okay, and set goals for carbon reduction. So if you come from a palm oil company or a dairy company, please watch your big buyers closely. For example, like Unilever, I'm not a food sector expert. Danone and Nestle, I think you need to align your own carbon goals with them, right? So so that's extremely important. It's not just about once again about reduce carbon for the climate reason, but also for your business development reason, right? So the last question I want to ask: have your buyers required you to improve your performance in sustainability? Can you make the selection? And I will show the polling result. 15 seconds, maybe. I guess it's yes, because international buyers. Let's see the result. Yes, more than half of the 63% select yes. That's also my guess, because multinational companies, they have requirements for carbon reduction or for sustainability for their suppliers, right? Okay, that's good, pretty good. I think the message is we all need to take actions as soon as possible, right? So if you need any help from BSI, we will be happy to provide support. So last, I will quickly introduce who we are and what we can do. We are a Royal Charter Standard Organization, headquartered in London. Okay, we developed standards, provide service like certification, verification, and training and advisory services. These are some numbers about BSI. Okay, so for example, we have 84,000 clients in 193 countries. Okay, so our services almost cover every country in the world, and we have 4,600 colleagues and 12,200 experts worldwide. Okay, so I don't want to explain the specifics of those numbers, we developed ISO 9001. It's the quality management system, right? And we developed first sustainability standards like ISO 14001 and PAS 2060. PAS 2060 is the only carbon neutrality standard was developed by BSI 12 years ago. Okay, so next year it will be upgraded to ISO 14068. It will be coming very soon. Okay, at last, I want to say sustainability means future. We want to work with all of you on a sustainable future. Okay, let's roll up our sleeves. I'm inviting all of you to join us in taking actions immediately and shaping the future. Thank you. Over to you, Nicholas.
Thank you very much, Wan Yang. Real, very insightful and very, very good presentation. I've heard about sustainability for a long time now, but every time I attend a presentation, I keep on learning. So thank you very much for setting the scene. Obviously, a lot of information, but really happy to see that 70% have already started their journey towards net zero. So I think it's a great success and something that we should celebrate. So thank you very much, Wan Yang. I would like now welcome our second speaker, Mr. Bremen Yang, the Director of Sustainability of Apical Group. Apical, headquartered in Singapore, is a fully integrated global palm oil producer, processor, and exporter. As the head of sustainability, Bremen leads Apical's journey towards becoming one of the most reputable sustainability leaders in the palm oil sector. He advocates sustainable and ethical business conducts, leads the effective implementation of Apical sustainability policy, and drives positive changes in the supply chain, inclusively through Apical's sustainability framework. Please welcome Mr. Bremen Yang. Thank you.
Thank you, Nicholas. Okay. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for your time. And firstly, I would like to thank BSI for inviting me to speak in this very meaningful event, especially on this net zero. So the topic I would like to talk about today is how can organizations develop net zero strategies? What are challenges and best practices learned from your journey? So I think this is a very interesting topic, and just our earlier speaker, Wan Yang, also set a very good scene and share a very detailed and good knowledge about what is all about net zero, climate change, the climate actions, as what company can do. So before I start, let me briefly introduce about Apical Group, which Nicholas have shared a little bit more about. So basically, we are headquartered in Singapore and operations based in Malaysia, Indonesia, and other countries as well. Currently, we are managing 8 refineries, 4 biodiesel plants, 2 KCPs, and 5 oil chemical plants. As of last year, we handled 11.1 million metric tons of palm oil products. And when it comes to sustainability, Apical has a very long journey when it comes to committed to sustainability since 2010 and 2011. Since then, we gotten the RSPO and SCC certification. And over the journey, Apical also launched a sustainability policy in 2014. And up to today, I think we have made lots of progress when it comes to sustainability. But as for those in the palm oil sector, we also, I believe many of you know that the focus in the past is very much in terms of compliance, getting certified, sell at premium, and comply with the customer requirements. But also what is more important for us actually is look beyond compliance to do beyond that, especially net zero and climate actions and many other activities or social activities as well. So as a result of the efforts we're making in terms of the sustainability, we have secured one of the first and largest sustainability linked loan in last year at $750 million. And of course, going beyond that, this year in February 2022, we also achieve the next level, pick our milestone by committing to Apical 2030. I would say this is very significant and meaningful milestone for us because it marked the company's commitment to the next level in terms of committing to the 4 strategic pillars. So the first one about transformative partnership is about partnering with our supply chain actors and suppliers in driving positive transformation into supply chain. We believe nobody should work in silo. Second, about climate actions and green innovation. Climate actions is very much related to our topic today on the net zero and the carbon reductions. Third one, of course, when we try to pursue net zero and emission reductions, innovations must come into place. The last pillar about inclusive progress, about how we can include farmers and local community when we grow our business so that the community can benefit from both social and environmental aspect as well. So this is just a quick snapshot of what we have committed, which I believe will drive significant changes. And we are actually also exploring lots of partnerships together with our stakeholders as how to drive these changes in our supply chain. So back to the topic of today as about our journey is setting the net zero. Of course, for many companies who started this net zero journey, the first thing will be the challenges they face. The very first question is about how to start. Do we have the top management commitment or support to kickstart to even set a target for the net zero or not? Should we just simply set a net zero target and see what to do next? Or should we go through a certain process so that our decision or our commitment to net zero is solid and robust? Of course, this is one of the first challenge that we need to convince the management and also talk to the teams and also to get everybody move in the same direction. So net zero commitment is not a corporate level commitment. It is about everybody commitment, all the departments and business unit and organizations is committed to the same directions. Second thing is about the industrial readiness and knowledge gaps. And for those companies who have been already in this journey or about to go into this journey, the first thing they will say, they will have lots of question marks in hands. Net zero, is it profitable? Is it really about business? Is that really a business case for the net zero? Or is it we are doing it just for the sake of doing it? Of course, and also the mindset initiative we say, let's say for example, we reduce the carbon. That will include investment. There will be additional costs. How can we add value to our business? Let's say we everybody's doing it, customers doing it, the world is moving towards that direction. I like the Nokia story just now about doing nothing wrong might not be the way going forward. We have to do something right. That's why by looking long-term in the long visions, then we can see how company action today really can help company strengthen the future position. So there must be a business case. The question is, we need to explore. The next thing about the protocol. In the past, many companies adopt the ISCC GHG protocol calculations, then also RSPO BAM GHG, and now we are talking about international GHG protocol. So which protocol, which way to use? And also in the landscape of the net zero or the emission reduction, there is lots of different findings, different perspective, and different requirements. So it is still in the process of getting things crystallized. So along the way, you will face with lots of uncertainties in terms of protocols, standards. But fortunately enough, there have been some standards coming already in place. For example, there are also this carbon accounting and the corporate reporting, also science-based target. These are the very useful standards and protocol the company can refer to. But of course, as a newcomer to this net zero landscape, this will become a big question marks for many companies. Next thing about the regulations. How about the Malaysia-Indonesia regulation, Indonesia or the Singapore regulations? We come to carbon tax, we come to carbon pricing. Just now, also when you're talking about the carbon border adjustment mechanism, all these are the driver for the future, for the trend of how company is moving forward too. And there is lots of clarity that company need to seek. So that's why when it comes to regulations, it is also something the companies really need to face to get better knowledge of. That's, of course, next about carbon pricing. In order to make it a business case, what is the carbon price? For example, for the gold standard, for example, for the fair price premium, it could be talking about $10, 10 US dollar and more. Talking about carbon border adjustment mechanism, if based on EU ETS, about 2 years ago, it was talking about 25 euro. Then 1 year ago, about 50 euro. And just before this, during the Ukraine war, it was talking about, it was a crash in pricing, but today it's go up to about 83 euro. So we can see the carbon pricing is increasing. And we expect the pricing is going to increase further in the future when more and more demand is coming when it comes to the carbon. So next about the technology. Do we have the technology today to help us achieve the net zero? Nobody has an exact answer, because the technology today can help you reach or reduce or mitigate impacts of carbon. But we need more technology, innovations, and advancement in the future to really bring us there. But so these are all the questions that companies will face when it comes to setting the net zero target or the carbon reductions target. So after that, of course, the data. Data is a very important element in this net zero journey. Where do we get the data from? Internally, do we already have the data? And how do we structure ourselves internally and externally, working with the stakeholders to gather necessary data to measure and subsequently to monitor or even to validate or verify for the carbon credit issued in the future. So data play an important role. Technology or digitalizations also will be part of the solutions that help us improve the data availability and accuracy. Resistant to change. Because of so many questions the company has, of course, there will be loss of resistance, especially internally. How do we start? Should we just come up with a target and deploy it to everybody in the company? That we can imagine how high the resistance level will be. So that's why this net zero targets, I think, is not just sort of department process, it's everybody's process. So finally, of course, net zero really, is there really a climate change? So I think Wan Yang also, like I quoted so many times, but Wan Yang also like explained very well about the net zero, the reality of the climate change. So with all these questions in mind, this is the first thing that many companies need to address internally and the various level of organization before they can make a decision to kickstart. So when it comes to after all, besides the challenges, what are the best practices? So the first advice or the suggestions we have is be real. It's not about looking good. It is important for a company to start right from the beginning. It is not just about, yes, somebody else set the target, so we have to set it, we have to follow. No, it's not like that. It must have a real intention, a purpose in terms of the committing to the climate actions. It is not about doing something just to communicate, make a nice communication plan for it. It's not about that. So be real. Climate actions or net zero is about taking real action. Secondly, be inclusive. As I said, it is not a department process. You cannot just expect one department, a few persons come up with a target and then endorsed by the top level and deploy to the whole organization. If we do that, that will be the high level of the resistance because the target is not owned by everybody. So it's very important to get everyone involved from the beginning. Set the right structures, governance, and secretariat, the project process, and then the right teams to work on it, involve the team members from various backgrounds, from the logistics, from operations, from the finance, from fast sustainability, and so on. Then together we come up with the target. We own the target when we implement it together. So it is important to work with others. And of course, in the process, we need to work with experts as well. Third-party perspective is very important. This is not only the inside-out process, but also the outside. We need to take the input from both in and out. So the third good practice I would say is be systematic and adopt science. Right. So firstly, we need to have a process. We need to design who should involve in the process, how the process will look like, and how can we get the senior management support? How can we adopt certain methodology? How can we benchmark, etc. So, and also when it comes to the standards and protocols, so there are also like science-based target setting. They have already specified some steps company can adopt, can follow. Then also there's a GHG protocol for the scope 1 to 3, and also for carbon accounting. All these existing standards and protocol really is again be a very good reference for companies to start with. The next thing, of course, materiality. Before we do something, there must be a meaning and purpose. Besides doing it for the sake of sustainability, contributing to the future and reducing the carbon, we also need to understand what is important for our stakeholders from their perspective, from the customers, from the financial institution, from the governments, or from our suppliers. From all these stakeholder perspectives, what is important for them? And also, what is our business priorities? By having this materiality set right, that will help us guide the process in terms of conducting the necessary research and benchmark against the standards, against the national, the NDC benchmark about our customers or the global commitments towards the net zero or the carbon reduction. Based on all this information, then we prioritize and come up with a strategy house. So this is a very strategic approach. And in fact, setting a net zero is not something we just come up with in 1 or 2 or 3 months. It took 1 year to carry lots of detailed studies, working together with experts and involve everybody before we set up a PICA 2030 targets. So of course, in the process also, we need to set baseline. So there's the best practice in terms of setting baseline. If according to the SPD, they will encourage company to set baseline not before 2015, so that it is more recent or more reflective from current situations. And of course, you need to set the boundary. So in terms of ownership, in terms of management, control, operation, and all that, there's many decisions that need to be made. This will reflect on the data requirements and the data collection process later. Then we comes to target setting. So setting a target of net zero, there are also, I heard a lot about like some companies saying, okay, well, companies set the net zero target, but many of them do not know how to achieve it. They don't know how to do it. So it is important to set the target from top-down and bottom-up approach. Top-down means we need to set a robust, ambitious target. Bottom-up, that means we need to test it. There must be limit tests. Already, this is something achievable and within through the programs and through the team resources and capacity we have or not. And then next one about the roadmap and finance gaps. So roadmap is putting the targets and relay out in the actual actions, what the company can do or intend to do in the next couple of years until 2030, until 2050, then to materialize the net zero target. Yeah, one more thing about the target setting. Besides setting the net zero, it is very important to have interim target. Interim target, many companies set interim target at 2025, 2030, 2035, 2040, etc. This interim target is very important to track the company progress in terms of achieving the net zero target. So if according to the general requirements for the net zero, so if according to the science, so basically companies should set target around 50% of emission reduction by 2030. So that will contribute to the journey of the net zero. Then, of course, when we have the target, we have the roadmap. What's next? There are lots of gaps to iron out. We have business gaps. How can we make business case and contribute to the business value? Then technology gap. How can we find out the right technology at a reasonable cost that really functional and really help to reduce the emission, but at a reasonable and an acceptable cost? Then, of course, this will involve the future technology innovations that I believe the cost of technology will be getting more and more affordable and practical in the future. The next, of course, the finance gap. How do we finance all this project? So for example, there are companies that can decide to internally finance this project. There are also something like carbon credits. Like through carbon credit actually is very important platform in my view, that to help company navigate through this process to reduce the carbon in the interim period before they can really move forward to achieve the net zero in the future. then of course we need to act, we need to track, we need to monitor, and for carbon credit, we need to go through carbon validation verification process, and of course disclosure and reporting also important. So these are some of the key elements which I would like to share about having a systematic and organized process and adopt science. The next thing is, don't be afraid to embrace the unknown. So 2050 is a long time. So lots of uncertainties and many things we don't know about. But that is okay, even though in the process of setting the target, you don't know whether you can achieve net zero, how far you can achieve it, but of course we have to measure it. Set the baseline, we got to go through carbon footprint assessment to measure how big the gap it is. But let's not too afraid about the gaps. Gaps can be healthy because the gaps actually is the driver for companies to continue to innovate and look for new solutions. If we are setting a target, have no gaps, you know we can achieve it today, even technology today, that means you are not ambitious enough. So let's have a new perspective that gaps is healthy. So in conclusion, talking about net zero, I believe it is a very important responsibility for many companies and people, especially in view of the climate change, which will be affecting the future generation. And it is about collaborating, how companies and we all can work together and collaborate. This is not about the competition of who is getting there first and second, because net zero actually involved for the Scope 1, 3, involve everybody along the supply chain. It is not just a single company matter. So when it comes to net zero, what we like to say, it is about shared responsibility and collaboration for us to make a better future together. Thank you.
Thank you, Bremen. Thank you very much for your time and for your presentation today. Again, there's a lot of information to digest. We have received a few questions, and there is one question that I would like to ask you now, if you don't mind. The question is, how does the carbon border adjustment mechanism work? And do they fine or charge the EU if they decide to perform production in other countries with lax emission regulations?
So you want me to answer this question right now, immediately?
Yeah, if you don't mind, yeah.
Okay, no problem. Maybe I just, there are some details about the CBAM over here, can show you. So basically, the EU importers of goods covered by the CBAM registers, it's their responsibilities, okay? It's not the exporters, it's the importers' responsibilities to register with national authorities in EU countries, okay? So they will have to buy CBAM certificates. The certificates are priced based on weekly ETS allowances. So right now, as Bremen said, the price is 83 euro, right? 83 euro. So EU importer, they declare the emissions embedded in its imports. So basically, the importer, they will ask, because they don't have the data. They need to ask the exporters, for example, the carbon emission data for the product they import from countries in ASEAN, in Australia, in China, right? So the product producers, they need to disclose the carbon data and submit the data to the importers. Then the importer surrenders the corresponding number of certificates each year. Okay, and so here, if importers can prove that a carbon price has already been paid during the production of the imported goods, for example, in China, because there is already a carbon exchange market. If the producer, they already pay the carbon emission cost in China's carbon exchange market, so this cost can be deducted. Okay, so basically, the importers, they need to rely on the exporters to produce the carbon data, to show the carbon data. Then the importers will surrender all the data, all the numbers to the authorities in EU countries. So that's basically the mechanism, how it works. So there are many other specifics. I think you guys, as I said, you can go to EU's website, but still some details haven't been decided. I think in the later half of this year, a lot of specifics will come out. Then, I suggest everyone, in this business, we need to watch very closely, the details, the specifics, because those specifics might be closely relevant to our business in Europe.
Thank you, Wan Yang. And that brings me to a question to Bremen now about data as well. So will there be big data available to justify a case larger than that, a business case? That's a question for you.
All right, can you repeat again the question?
Will there be, so the question for you is, will there be a big data available to justify a case larger than that, a business case?
Yes, I would say yes, because currently we do not have a complete information, but there are sufficient information for us to justify the business case. Let's say, for example, based on let's say we look at a carbon border adjustment mechanism, per ton of carbon is about 83 euro. That's a lot. Let's imagine for the per ton of the CPO we export to EU, how big the impacts will be for the carbon permit and announcements that the company need to, but the impact to the business is going to be tremendous. If in the future, even though for carbon border adjustment mechanism, not only implemented for certain selected industry, but in the future, possibility is it will be expanded to include more industry in the future. So the impacts can be measured. And besides that, based on the carbon credit or the pricing, so that can be another indications about the emissions today, how would be the cost to the business by measuring in terms of the carbon credit pricing. Other information, other data information you can look into. Let's say, for example, Singapore, currently the carbon tax is about $5, but they are targeted to, they will be raising it to $25 in the next 2 to 3 years time. And also, so all this can be the informations that company can look into in order to justify the business case. But of course, internally, company need to carry out the carbon footprint assessment for scope 1 and scope 2, and subsequently for the scope 3 to see where they stand, where they are right now, how big the potential they are, where are they going in the future. From there, then we have a much clearer business case.
Thank you, Bremen. Thank you very much for your presentation and for your time.
Thanks.
It's now time to introduce Phil Dever, CEO of Construction Training Centre, CTC, in Queensland, Australia. Phil has been the CEO and the company secretary at the Construction Training Centre, CTC, in Queensland, Australia, since 2006, when he was asked to bring his management experience to fulfill the founder's vision of a relevant, sustainable, and fully occupied training hub that is CTC today. He has spearheaded initiatives such as the living laboratory concept and hot leasing, and is committed to developing a business model that continues to deliver value to the industry. Phil is also particularly passionate about collaborative consumption, corporate social responsibility, and circular economy. Please welcome Phil. Thank you.
Thank you, Nicholas. And thank you, everybody, for showing an interest in this very important topic. And probably today I'm talking more to the 30% that indicated they still to start their journey. And I want to thank Bremen and Wan, because it's almost like we did our homework together on this, because there's a lot of linkages between what I'm saying, and I'm coming from the small business world particularly. And it's a set of golden rules. I'm calling it the paradox of the and. But I'm coming to you today from Meanjin, which is the traditional name for Brisbane in Queensland. And this is the traditional home of the Yagara and Turrbal people. And those First Nations people have been on this very land 14,000 years, and they have a heritage in this area going back 65,000 years. So climate change is no stranger to our First Nations people, but anthropogenic climate change is. So it's a topic that's new to us all, and it's one where I think, there's a real struggle, and there's a real struggle for us in small business in particular. So it was mentioned before, I think, Bremen, you mentioned the fact that you don't want to compartmentalize, an approach to net zero. But where small business has a disadvantage from the corporate world is the corporate world can probably silo it a little bit and put a lot of resource, a lot of corporate resource around that, and they can put their PR and their marketing department drive behind that too. And that probably links to what Emmanuel was saying at the beginning when he introduced, which is, the contribution towards greenwashing by maybe PR and marketing. So I have a series of golden rules, and my golden rule number 1 is aim to get to net zero and don't aim to get to net zero. And the reason I say that is because what we're going through at the moment with small business is probably an existential crisis of the viability of our own businesses. And it's very hard, I think, to excite yourself and your team with the existential crisis of the planet when we're just here to survive. And guess what? The planet is not, there is no problem with the planet. The planet is absolutely safe. Don't get that wrong. Human existence on the planet is where the real struggle is. So when we're faced with interest rate increases, inflation, difficulties with our supply chain, trying to get raw materials, what is called the big resignation, we're just trying to keep our staff and attract them. There's no surprise that our main focus isn't going to be on net zero. So when I see the definition that I most often use for net zero, which net zero means achieving a balance between carbon emitted into the atmosphere and the carbon removed from it, and the balance or net zero will happen when the amount of carbon we add to the atmosphere is no more than the amount removed. Well, good luck with your small business team, with your staff, in really getting their head around that and really giving a damn. So that's why I say, you know, be interested in it and not so interested in it. And my second golden rule is have a positive mindset and be very suspicious. Barely a day goes by now, barely a week goes by when there isn't a report, whether it's IPCC or a report from a think tank like McKinsey here, where it's just bad news. It's really doom and gloom. And there are some scientists that are saying that that inflection point where it's irreversible climate change has already passed us. And if I take this recent McKinsey report here, 2022, even if all countries with net zero commitments deliver on their aspirations, global warming is projected to reach an increase of 1.7 degrees centigrade by 2100. It's very easy to just hold your hands up in despair and say, look, we really can't do much about it because it's irreversible anyway, and we're a small business, and the minute thing that we're going to do isn't going to make a change anyway. And the reason I say you have to maintain the positive mindset, because in the positive mindset space is the creativity, and in the creativity is the solution. But you also have to be very suspicious, and you have to be very suspicious, I think, for a range of reasons, acknowledging that some of your team that you need to inspire around climate change and net zero, sustainability, circular economy, cradle to cradle, all these other elements that are embraced in the environment. Some of them are going to be skeptical, some of them are going to be climate change skeptics. So it's very important, I think, to do both. And for me, net zero and climate change, I've been an accredited Green Star professional since 2008. I actually don't understand a lot of the concepts, to be honest. And because I don't understand them, I'm sort of reluctant to hold my hand up and ask, because I'm generally in forums where people really seem to know what they're talking about. And I'm certainly not in a situation where I'm really feel comfortable challenging it. So climate change is a very simple notion, but when you scratch the surface of it, it gets complex really quickly. So my piece of advice would be to get the complex concept of some of the climate change aspects is to use a concrete example. I don't want to use concrete as an example. If concrete was a country, it'd be the 8th largest greenhouse gas emitter. But a concrete example in terms of something that your team can understand. And the motor vehicle for me almost embraces every single aspect of climate change. And when I saw you used a car in one of your slides. So the car is something we can all understand. And of course, the car is also a huge greenhouse gas emitter. And I think we can be positive, because it really is the beautifully new engineered green Polestar 2. Lovely piece of engineering, 100% electric vehicle. And I love those stats, 0 to 100 kilometers per hour in 4 seconds. So this vehicle here will match or beat high-end sports cars with internal combustion engines. Just fantastic. That is the future. However, This is the dashboard from the Polestar 2, and I've just highlighted the odometer there. So in order for this vehicle to get to carbon neutral, net zero from its carbon, to expense that carbon out, it is going to have to drive 110,000 kilometers. So that's the challenge and the task ahead of us as managers and leaders, to actually try and get our head around that and not be negative from it. So my next golden rule is number 4, start with purpose and no real direction. Small businesses like us, and certainly medium and large enterprises, are always going to have mission, vision and values. And you do that exercise where you say, how does what we want to do align to our mission, our vision and our values? My suggestion would be, and it's kind of being a bit disrespectful, but I would say start with purpose and just put aside the mission, vision and values. Start with purpose and no real direction. And the reason I say that is because your direction will come from your team when you engage their hearts and minds. When they really understand what the issues are, they will actually come up with that direction. And once you've got that sense of direction, you can align your stuff back to what your mission and your vision and your values are. For many of us at the moment, our mission and vision are on the back burner because we're just trying to survive and get us through this difficult time. But if I have to say, just remember one slide from my presentation, it would be this one. And that is, how does your focus on climate change or net zero impact on your value creation? So if your focus on climate change or net zero is 0, you have no focus, then just ask yourself the question, how does that 0 or lack of focus on climate change or net zero impact on your value creation? Because I'll come back to that later, but I think that's a very important question to come back to, particularly for small business who may not think it's that important. So Bremen, you mentioned data, and I saw this recently on LinkedIn, and I thought, yeah, this is right. Without data, you're just a person with an opinion. And then I sort of reflected on that for a few minutes and thought, with data, you're just a person with the conviction of your own bias. So people will look at data through the convictions or the preconceived notions that they already had. And I don't know how many of you have colleagues elsewhere who are climate change deniers, but I have some, because I'm known as a little bit of a tree hugger, and they love to send me data. They send me charts, they send me the science, and they send me graphs which prove that anthropogenic climate change isn't real. So that brings me to golden rule number 5, which is forge ahead without data and information, and with data and information. So you're never going to have perfect data. I think, Bremen, you just mentioned that. You're never going to have perfect data or information, but start without it, but put it on your list of things to do and start collecting it as you move forward. Don't use the lack of data or information to actually stop you from starting. Think big, start small. Fantastic advice. That's what the academics will tell you. That's what the wisdom in industry is. So my golden rule number 6 is think big and start big. And the reason I say that is there is a complexity to net zero that once you start on the journey, quite quickly you can disappear down a rabbit hole. It becomes almost too big to understand all of that complexity. And if you've started on a small issue, you're still going to go down a rabbit hole. And when you go down the rabbit hole, your team are going to be dispirited. They just want to get that next order out on the lorry. They're just going to want to resolve that next email that they've received around sales. So if you start small, the chances are you're going to run out of energy. Your team's going to run out of steam. And this is an example of one of the things that my team looked at recently. And it's quite a big thing, but when we looked at the amount of waste we generate from our site, 80% of it goes to landfill. And that is just a shocking figure. It shocked me into saying, come on team, we need to do something about it. We are now working on a really good plan to get that down to 25%. And the beauty of that is it's a really big thing. It's not a really small thing, it's a really big thing. But the ideas that are coming from the team, because it's concrete, they can see it and they can see the impact of what we do on the environment. So my advice, start big, think big, start big. Golden rule number 7, manage so no one's left behind and lead like no one's watching. And the reason I say that is because it's very important that we as leaders put ourselves out in front. It isn't going to happen necessarily from people coming from behind. So lead like no one's watching, put it out there and be brave in it. So the building construction industry in which I inhabit is the, I guess the world's one of the world's most significant contributors to climate change. About 40% of all greenhouse gases are determined by the built environment. So you're not necessarily going to be well regarded if you actually become a tree hugger and you start to get interested in these new ideas of sustainability and net zero. But this is our building at work, and we have a flyover that goes in front of our building, and there's tens of thousands of cars that go every day. And this is the doomsday clock. And that's actually, hope it hasn't moved on from that because it costs a lot of money to put that up there, but it's very close to midnight, and it's primarily close to midnight because of climate change. So you have to put yourself out there, and you also have to make sure that you take your team on the journey. So when I talk about climate change skepticism or climate change denial, you need to embrace some of those discussions with your team. And I'm assuming most of the audience have some involvement with ISO and certifications. We're quintuple certified. We have 5 certifications here. And the two words that epitomize ISO and certifications is continuous improvement. And I have to hold my hand up. I love continuous improvement, and I'm a bit of a fad surfer. So I get out ahead and I'm always trying new things. Do they work? And what I find with some of my team is they will sit there and watch me go running by, wasting all that energy, and they will wait for me to come in running back, and they'll pick up with me when I go. So it's very important that when you begin the journey for net zero, you have a deep well of tenacity and energy, because it isn't about the journey. Quite often we say it's not about the destination, it's about the journey. This is about the destination. So you have to take your people with you, and that's been very important in our place. So that's us, that's our business. So we're a set of really old industrial sheds. We're a small business. We are 12.2 hectares in size, and we're on the fringe of our CBD. So for many years, I've been here a long time, for many years, I've lamented the fact that I have these old buildings. I really want 6-star green star buildings. I want high neighbors energy ratings. I want high sustainability. I want building management systems so I could sit at my desk and look at dials and see how well we're going and project that out to the world. And then I thought, I need to take a positive mindset to this. And the reason I need to do that is we can look at these old buildings in a different way. They don't have to be the handicap that for years I thought they were dragging us down. And if you think about a car example again, so if you think about who is the most, I wish I'd done a poll on this, who is the most sustainable car manufacturer in the world? So first off, you might think, well, is it Tesla? Because Tesla's only ever made, battery electric vehicles. And then you might go, well, actually, to be fair, Toyota got on that board many years ago with the Prius, and the Prius has really set the way. Well, the answer is actually Aston Martin. And the reason it's Aston Martin is because a phenomenal 90% of Aston Martins that were ever made are still being driven. They're still on the road. So with that example, we started to think about reuse and repurpose. So if you think about old, and that's my next golden rule, number 8, old is a hindrance and a help. So those organizations that are out there, particularly those small organizations that are going, but we lease our premise, or we're really old, we don't have this modern, fantastic green star, latest technology. Think about your organization in a different way. And this actually photo is taken from the 1930s in our shed. So if you look at those columns at the back, the steel columns at the back, and the concrete, the embodied carbon of both those items has been expensed years ago. In fact, if I pulled these down now and built latest green star 6-star buildings, our carbon footprint would be going up. and not down. So when you start to think about that in a different way, you start to look at, well, what opportunities do we have here? They're not old buildings anymore to us, they're opportunities. And if you think about old large industrial sheds, guess what? They have a lot of roof space. And when you have a lot of roof space, you have a lot of solar potential. So if you look at that circled area there, on the next slide, you'll see we just took that overhead photo via a drone a couple of weeks ago. And the difference you can see is the solar panels that we put on. So we put on 500 solar panels, producing 242 kilowatts of energy production. So when you think about things differently, the opportunities will actually come. And the final thing I want to talk about is when you get momentum, momentum almost becomes an irreversible process. So when you build confidence and momentum, particularly with your team, then you can actually start to think bigger. And this is our latest project. We've just secured impact investment for it. And it is a new facility at our center. And it is going to be built to the International Passive House Standard. Now, we're building this as an exemplar build to prove that you can build in a sustainable way without breaking the budget. And all the students that are going to go through this center, the center has a narrative. It will speak to all those students about all its credentials. So there's a learning going on. The building will actually be teaching just because you're actually sitting in that building. And you might think, well, how can you build one of these cheaply? Well, that's the mechanical engineering design of the building if we're building it traditionally. So the wisdom sort of is you can go green, sure, but it costs you more money to do it. So a lot of people don't go green. They want to go green, particularly small business, but they can't afford it. So that's the mechanical, if we're going to heat and cool this building mechanically. And in Queensland, believe me, in the summer, we have to cool it, and the winter, when it gets to a chilly 23 degrees that it is today, everyone is heating their building. And that's the design, the passive design that we're going to put in. And the mechanical engineering you see in there for the heating cooling is just a redundancy. We anticipate we'll use that a maximum of 3 weeks a year. So if you think about that complexity versus that complexity, that gets you to my golden rule number 9, which is getting to net zero is both expensive and saves money. And the comment was made before about, I think it was you, Bremen, about climate change reputation. And I would say as a small business, we now need to start thinking about our climate reputations and what that means in terms of value creation. So I'm old enough to remember the 70s and 80s when bless BSI for creating the quality standard. But I remember when you had to bid for government projects or large corporations projects, you had to show you were certified to pretty much ISO 9001. Those days are not so much with us now, but we will, before too long, even as small enterprises, have to actually put our climate credentials in our tender documents, even to pre-qualify. And they'll have to be credentials that are third-party certified. So there'll be some credentials around that. And that my final slide is golden rule number 10. Even though it might be down to me, that's me on the right there. So I've barely aged since this was taken. But it relies on your team. You can't do this. You can come up with the ideas, but unless your team have embraced the concept of net zero sustainability and climate change, it won't get delivered on the ground. And I put all of our kind of broad age groups there because we've got a Gen Z and a Gen Y. And one of the things that climate change has taught us particularly, and COVID, is that Gen Z and Gen Y are very values-based. So we're going through a struggle at the moment with the big resignation. I'm sure that's happening everywhere around the world. We're finding it hard to keep our staff, and we're finding it hard to recruit staff. Well, one of the ways you can keep your staff, and I think recruit staff, is to have some really ambitious projects that everyone can coalesce around. So everyone focused in the same direction, getting high levels of retention, high levels of staff satisfaction, and you're getting greater output from your team. So it's win-win-win from that point of view. And my final slide I'm going to leave you with is my overarching golden rule. That is, perfect is the enemy of good. Just get started. So I really wish you all the best on your own journey and creating your own set of golden rules. Back to you,
Thank you, Phil.
Nicholas.
Thank you very much for your presentation, your energy and your passion. It's good to see. It's good to read. We have a question for you, Phil. Any example, sorry, to lead behavior change in your team in kickstarting the big climate journey?
I was going to talk about skills because very early on, once the teams start to get a bit of an understanding about climate change and net zero, and I use those interchangeably because I think if you don't start the journey to net zero, but you decide to introduce a circular economy into your business, it's going to have the same impact. They're all going to sort of work together. And that is, you want to start building your resumes of your team in terms of getting some technical skills around climate change. And that's where training helps. So we actually, one of our team, we encouraged to do a postgrad certificate in the behavioral components of climate change with Monash University in Melbourne. And so just to learn almost the neuroscience and the psychology of how you actually can take people on the climate change. Everyone, we've got 40 tenants here. Every one of them is really busy. Many of them are struggling, but we still have to take them on the journey because we can't take it on our own without, taking our tenants with us. And that really starts with understanding their business and really understanding fundamentals of change. So change management is absolutely fundamental to how you go about that.
Thank you, Phil. Thank you very much. It's now time to introduce our last speaker, Wei Mei. She's the Global Head of Carbon and Environmental Products at Air Carbon Exchange. Wei Mei is responsible for structuring carbon products and processes within Air Carbon. Prior to her appointment at Air Carbon, Wei Mei spent over 6 years working on climate change related matters within the Prime Minister's office in Singapore. She was particularly focused on matters related to GHG accounting, climate risk, and emissions trading. She also helped to articulate Singapore's climate change policies at various local and international fora, including those hosted by the World Bank and FCCC. Sorry. Please welcome Wei Mei.
Yes, thank you very much, Nicholas. That was quite a mouthful, quite an introduction. I'm actually going to keep my presentation quite quick today. And if we have a little bit of time, hopefully we do, I'm actually going to try and show you a demo of how carbon can be traded on a carbon exchange. So I suppose I am at the end of the seminar today, because I also I'll probably also come in at the end of everybody's net zero or carbon neutrality journey. So what that means is that when you do all your climate projects or climate action projects, or implement your plan to go net zero, what happens is you will still have residual emissions after all your actions have been put into place. So you still have residual emissions, you still have a carbon footprint. And that's where carbon offsets and potentially carbon trading come in. So that's where we come in. We'll use the carbon credits, whether they are avoidance credits or removal credits, and you apply them towards your residual emissions, and you can be either carbon neutral or net zero, depending on the standard you want to apply. I hope everybody can see my screen. Somebody telling me, yes, perfect. Yeah, that's standard line over Zoom these days. But yeah, so that's where carbon trading comes in. My name is Wei Mei. I'm head of products at Air Carbon. Air Carbon was named the best carbon exchange for the voluntary carbon markets for 2021 by Environmental Finance. And I'm going to dive into carbon trading and how you can do it. How do you get your hands, or how do you acquire some carbon credits when you are towards the end of your MRV processes, when you have completed measuring and verifying your carbon emissions. What do you do with them? How do you offset them? I'm not going to go through the first two slides because I think that's been very well covered today by our fellow panelists. It tells you more about, your commitments to net zero or carbon neutrality. It talks a little bit about carbon trading and carbon markets around the world, but those are just general intro slides. What I want to do is I want to jump into carbon credits and how they are acquired or traded traditionally, and how you can do that today. So traditionally, how people buy and sell carbon credits is project developers create carbon credits based on carbon crediting projects, and they actually take their carbon credits to middlemen or aggregators, and it's the middlemen who actually contact potential buyers of these carbon credits. This is known as over-the-counter trading of carbon credits. Traditionally, that's how a lot of the trading of carbon credits has happened. And because it's a lot of people just negotiating agreements with each other, it's a very opaque market. So I'm sure a lot of you have heard about how the carbon markets are very opaque, they're very difficult to navigate, so on and so forth. I think a lot of those comments are generated because of how people have traded carbon credits in the past. So on my slide right now, we have a couple of comments here, which are traditionally project developers have used third parties to sell the carbon credits. Buyers, we've heard of, paying 20 to 40% markups on the transaction. That's quite hefty. And in the absence of a transparent marketplace, project developers, even buyers, seldom know what's the true market value of the credits. In fact, nobody might know. So we've heard of carbon credits and projects, same vintage, same project, similar time frame. They have like multiple different price points. Why is that the case? It's your guess is as good as mine. So that's how carbon credits have transacted in the past. But I don't want to tar all the brokers and aggregators out there with the same brush. On one end of the spectrum, you could have very reputable, very professional carbon credit advisors, consultants, or brokers. They might provide you with some advisory telling you what might suit your needs best when it comes to going carbon neutral or going net zero, or they might advise you, what kinds of projects might align best with your company's values or what you're trying to achieve from an ESG perspective. There are even some top-notch advisors like retro advisors who might even tell you what is the markup that they're earning on the carbon credits. So that's one end of the spectrum, very respectable, very professional end of the spectrum when it comes to OTC trades of carbon credits. OTC means over the counter. It's where you negotiate a trade or you buy carbon credits of a broker or an aggregator. So while you have one end of the market that's very professional, of course, there's the other end of the market, which is significantly less so. And that's where a lot of the opacity, a lot of the criticism of the carbon markets often comes about. So for example, projects might be misrepresented. Projects may not have the certifications that they're supposed to have. They're from certain carbon crediting standards, which are not as highly regarded as some of the other standards out there. So these are the issues which can occur sometimes when buyers aren't sure of what carbon credits they should be acquiring. So it could be because they're not so well advised. So there's a whole spectrum of aggregators and brokers out there. Also, when you go into an OTC sort of situation, you might be negotiating agreements. So every time you want to acquire some carbon credits, so you want to sell some carbon credits to your project developer, you have to go through a contractual process. And of course, there's lawyers, there might be advisors. It's a very long, drawn out and potentially very slow process. There's counterparty risk. You might not know who you're doing business with because KYC and AML is a very involved process. That's especially relevant today. So those are some of the risks that you encounter when you're on the OTC markets. If you're a project developer looking to sell carbon credits, a lot of times they sell the carbon credits to aggregators on a long-term contract basis. So they're not able to take advantage of any price increases over time. So they're actually selling potentially the carbon credits at a pittance. Some of these project developers are actually NGOs and And we've heard of like certain cases where they like the communities which are actually generating these carbon credits aren't actually generating enough of revenue from the economic event of actually selling their carbon credits. So that's some of the issues that you can encounter in the OTC market. So these are some of the current frictions in the traditional way of trading carbon credits. So what we have today is a bit of an upgrade. Let me move to my next slide, which provides an introduction. So the market needs direct access to an exchange or a marketplace that provides transparency, flexibility, low transaction costs, and of course, security. That's where Air Carbon comes in. We are an exchange for carbon credits. So you can buy and sell carbon credits very efficiently, securely, at an extremely low trade cost. So I'm going to run through this really quickly because what I want to do is actually to take you through a live demo so you can see what it's like to trade carbon on Air Carbon Exchange. Air Carbon Exchange is actually comprised of 3 components. There's the spot exchange. This is where carbon is traded via standardized contracts. So some of the standardized contracts that we have include the CORSIA standard. That standard was actually developed for airlines. So when airlines want to offset their carbon footprint, if they are part of ICAO's CORSIA program, they need to acquire carbon credits with a certain set of characteristics. And what we do at Air Carbon is we take all that carbon that meets those standards, which have been defined by the International Civil Aviation Organization, and we sort them into a basket, if you will. That's called a standardized contract. And you can just swoop in and buy the carbon credits out of this basket of carbon credits, and you can be assured that they will meet the CORSIA standard. So that standard is for airlines. Other kinds of standardized contracts which trade on Air Carbon Exchange include the Global Nature Token, Global Nature Contract, and that's for nature-based carbon credits with premium certifications. So they have additional certifications for community and biodiversity, for example. So it's not just a carbon credit, they also have additional certifications. So it's a bit of a premium nature-based product. So you can trade all of this on the spot exchange, and it's as easy as trading equities on a regular trading platform. And I'll try to do a demo if we have sufficient time. Another way of buying or even selling carbon credits is something we call the carbon market board. So basically here, instead of trading based on a standard or a standardized contract, what you do here is you buy carbon credits on a per project basis. So what happens on the carbon market board is it's basically a bulletin board where all the different projects out there are listed, and people have put them on Air Carbon Exchange for sale. So you can actually just go in here and take a look at what projects have been listed, choose what you think is appropriate for yourself, and then you can submit an offer to whoever's selling this carbon credit. So that's another way of basically shopping for carbon credits, if you like. The last way of acquiring carbon credits on Air Carbon Exchange is the auction process. So there are certain large project developers with very interesting projects with high quality carbon credits. They might be issuing carbon credits for the first time. And what they want to do is perhaps to do some price discovery. And what Air Carbon Exchange does is we from time to time host auctions for these projects. And clients of Air Carbon Exchange can actually just come, and then you can participate in the auction and bid for the carbon credits. So it's just like a regular auction, and you can participate in this as well. At Air Carbon Exchange, we are partners with BSI. What we do is for every carbon credit that gets onboarded to the exchange or is sold through the exchange, it actually goes through verification or a checking process. BSI is Air Carbon's carbon verifier. What they do is they check all the documents associated with each of the carbon projects. They make sure that they're properly registered with the right carbon registries and standards. The project has represented itself correctly. Does it have the right certifications that it's supposed to have? Does it, is it aligned or associated with the SDGs that they claim to be associated with? Was the monitoring and verification, has it actually been done? So all these checks are actually done by BSI, and Air Carbon has actually asked BSI to do this, and BSI answers to Air Carbon, and the exchange goes to BSI and says, is this project kosher? Has it met the requirements of the exchange or of the standardized contract? And BSI issues a letter that says, yes, we have gone through this checklist. Indeed, it meets the requirements. And then the carbon credits come to exchange. So this is what we mean by transparency and security for the buyers and the sellers on Air Carbon's platform. We also have a very transparent fee structure published on our website. Apart from this, Air Carbon is a spot exchange, and we also hold your cash, is a pre-funded account in a fully regulated trustee. And every client that comes onto Air Carbon Exchange goes through a KYC and AML process. It's extremely important so that everybody who's trading on the exchange feels comfortable and safe with all their counterparties. So this is what we mean by security, safety, transparency. This is, and of course, cost efficiency. Air Carbon is known for having some of the lowest fees on the market. This is just a bit of a cost comparison between the spot exchanges fees on Air Carbon, the carbon finders fees, as well as certain brokers that we've heard of. So these are the kinds of savings that you might be hoping to get if you come on board to Air Carbon. Actually leave folks to have questions if you.
There is really good one actually regarding double counting. How do we prevent double counting?
How do we prevent double counting? What do you mean of when carbon credits are produced, or what do you mean?
I'm not too sure, so I will let the participant ask the question again. But regarding that, actually, we are on the platform, so that becomes my question now. You're on the platform. You say you can trade on the Australian side. How do you prevent this company to go on another site and another provider and sell the carbon credit? Do they issue a certificate? Do they say, look, I've had 1,000, I've sold my thousands? How does it work actually?
Oh, I see. Okay, that's a really good question. So when it comes to the spot exchange, what happens is Air Carbon actually has a trust account within each of the carbon crediting standards. And anybody who wants to onboard carbon credits or sell carbon credits on the spot exchange, you actually need to deposit your carbon credits into this trust account. That's when the exchange can actually see the carbon credits. So we know you have it. And then when it comes on board to the exchange, we issue you with an electronic warehouse receipt. You can call it a token if you like, but it's basically a receipt. For every one carbon credit that you bring on board to the exchange, we issue you with one receipt. So if you bring me 11,000 carbon credits, I'll issue you with 11,000 receipt or tokens. And it's these receipts that trade on the exchange, and whoever has the receipt, is the owner of the carbon credit. So you can almost think of it as if you go to a dinner at a fancy restaurant and there's a code check, you check in your code, they give you a receipt, you come back to the receipt, they give you your code. That's all that's being, that's the process at Air Carbon Exchange. So that's how we ensure that each carbon credit that is on the exchange is actually owned by the seller. And once it's sold, the carbon credit moves across to the buyer. And of course, it's also happening on the fiat side or the currency side. So every account is pre-funded. So everybody who wants to buy carbon credits has to pre-fund their account. So even before trade starts on Air Carbon Exchange, we have established that all the sellers of the carbon credits indeed have the carbon credits. And we have established this because we can see it in our trust account. Similarly, on the money side of things, the cash side of things, we know that the buyers have the money because they have pre-funded their accounts, and that is what we use our regulated trustees for. So before trade starts, all the sellers have the credits, all the buyers have the money. When trade happens, the transaction goes through immediately. There is no counterparty risk. And of course, to answer your question on double counting or double issuance, there's no possibility of that, because every carbon credit that trades on the exchange you have a receipt that's issued on a one-to-one basis. And this is tracked using blockchain.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Wei Mei. So I will now welcome all the panelists to turn on their camera and start the panel discussion. So we are a bit over time, but I believe that the webinar was very insightful, and we have replied to that initial questions on that journey towards net zero. We have a lot of questions, and unfortunately we won't be able to reply to all of them, but there is another one about carbon for you, Wei Mei. So the carbon emitter or buyer accounts needed to be certified by VCS or GS or any of certification standard before we can trade in the carbon market platform.
Okay, so at Air Carbon Exchange, we only work with the most renowned and well-established carbon crediting standards in the world. We host carbon credits from currently Vera as well as Gold Standard. Soon we're adding more carbon crediting standards and registries out there. We are in the process of discussions. So stay tuned. There will be more announcements shortly.
Right. Thank you very much. I have a question actually for you, Phil, because in the food space, we talked about food safety culture. And I believe that what you mentioned as part of your presentation was also about the culture of sustainability to bring people on. What I would say is, do you have any, not about examples, but you also talked about the fact that people are leaving the companies and you said we need to have project, but can you define what a good project is and how to attract these people from a sustainability perspective? Because as much as you want to do good things, sometimes you just don't understand what good looks like. So what is a good project? What does sustainability culture means? And I don't know if that clear for you.
Can I tell you what I think it isn't? I did a seminar recently with Planet Arc on circular economy, and we broke into teams and we were given 20 minutes and we were given a pen, and we had to take this pen and get it to as circular as percentage as we could. After 20 minutes, we had got nowhere near just this one pen. And the amount of data we had with these preset spreadsheets was huge. And that made me think that, and that's why I have this notion of think big, act big. Because if we then came back to the company and said, we want to get to sort of net zero, we want to get to this sustainability, and we've got a small business, and we go, okay, we have to start this one pen. How do we actually work out the embodied carbon of this thing? Then seriously, everyone's going to go back to the desk and just do emails. So, but there are things that people can feel and touch, like it sounds basic, but leaving lights on, the actual putting of rubbish into the wrong bin, or just understanding the learning curve that I've been on personally about, and I'm pretty good on environment stuff, but just understanding waste management has been incredible. It's just really complex, and then distilling it down to things that people can actually understand. And a really good one for me at the moment is just, you have a bin which just says landfill. So everything that doesn't get recycled, seriously, just goes to landfill. So you just put landfill on the bin, which in Australia is a red bin, and simple things like that. And then just go around and keep reinforcing that message. But there's loads of things around water people can do. They don't necessarily have to start with the big, I'm going to get this company down to net zero. But in terms of carbon credits, I really like the idea of buying trees. So I was looking really closely at the example that you brought up, which is, it's got the nice mountain in the background and the trees. I think people love nature. So we've done about 20,000 trees, and I'm now thinking, what was the, how opaque was that transaction? So I'll be certainly looking. I've written a note down here, air carbon's on my list. So I think it's things like that, that concrete things that people can relate to are probably important than this general concept of some sort of mathematical approach.
Thank you, Phil. We have another question regarding GHG emissions. So who would like to reply to that question? But how do I tackle the most challenging area of GHG emissions, which is scope 3, and to get out our supply chains aligned with our organization's net zero goal? Can we please share and suggest some strategies to overcome these challenges? Anyone?
I think I probably can give some of my suggestions how to manage supply chain for net zero. I think especially, because scope 3, especially I think for some of the companies, scope 3 accounts for a big part of the total emission. So I think we need to attach importance to our key suppliers. That's for one. Second, I think you need to engage with your suppliers as soon as possible in early stage. Basically, you discuss with them, about the requirements, about the strategy, right? Basically, first of all, I think there are basically 3 steps you should do to manage your supply chain. First is requirements or criteria, right? The second is do the assessment. You need to do the assessment to give award to good performers, and probably to give advices or suggestions to comparatively bad performers, so that they can improve time by time. And last, probably you also need to give some support, for example, training, to organize some event to suppliers, so that they could be on the same page with you to work together with you for net zero. So basically 3 steps: set requirements, conduct assessment, and provide support.
Thank you very much. A question for Bremen. The world has tackled a lot about net zero. Do you think that we can achieve it?
Okay, thanks for the questions. I think first thing, well, we all can be optimistic about achieving the net zero, but in reality, no one has exact answer to that, because we are not God. We don't know how the world's going to change in the next 20, 30 years. But anyway, more important is right now is for us to do the right thing right now that can help us bring us up to the speed and skill in the future and put it on the right path. But another thing we need to be mindful that we have seen many examples of how markets, how government regulate regulations, how market react to changes, and ultimately the market will adjust to come up with the solutions. Especially when it comes to besides the market forces, also the technology innovations and how it's going to change the world. So I think overall still optimistic, but what I think what we can be more sure about today is the longer any company or we delay in this process, in our actions, it will be getting tougher for us, and also getting worse the impacts will be for us in the future. Yeah. Okay. Also, Nicholas, maybe I like to add a little point about the earlier questions about how to tackle the strategies, tackle the scope 3. I think in reality, the scope 3 is one of the biggest challenge when it comes to compare to scope 1 and scope 3 due to the indirect or the lack of the influence in the scope 3. But unfortunately, scope 3 in many incidents also constitute the largest part of the emissions for any organizations. So I think for the scope 3, we are talking about dealing with the smaller business, talking to also other suppliers and other stakeholders and upstream and the downstream supply chains. So I think it is very real concern, and it is very practical concern as well. As also shared earlier in my slide, by talking about tackling the gaps. There are business gaps, there are technology gaps, also the finance gaps. I think this can be the point that can get key driver for companies to consider as a strategy to engage and form partnership with the scope 3 companies. Finance gap, for example, talking about how can we help them, support them in terms of addressing the financial requirement. Is it really a business case, or are we just asking them to do so? So if addressing this finance gap effectively, of course, it becomes a very important driver for companies to involve at the scope 3 emission. Technology gap, do they really know what sort of technology? For the company who has more resources and the research development team, definitely we are in a better position to help the suppliers or the companies to address the scope 3 issues. So that means Ultimately, my point is about business, technology, and finance. I think this will be the key focus to help the scope 3. Thanks.
Thank you, Bremen. Last question for you, Aimee. The question is about the profile of people that are now selling the carbon. Do we have, are they more farmers? Is it individuals? Is it manufacturers? Do we have an idea about the profile and why?
The profile of the clients within Air Carbon Exchange?
Yeah, the one that are selling their carbon, actually. What is the profile of these
people who are selling their carbon? Yeah. It's a large variety of project developers. A lot of project developers are coming to us direct to sell their carbon. Some are NGOs from all the different kinds of projects out there. So it's there are also some aggregators and brokers who are on the exchange, and sometimes they may have access credits to sell, or sometimes they also buy using the exchange. So it's a big mix of different kinds of sellers. It's also the same on the buy side. It's a mix of different kinds of buyers. Some are professional traders, some are corporates, some are family offices. It's a mix.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you very much to all of you guys for your time today, and we really appreciate that at BSI. I hope that all the people participant have enjoyed the time today. It's now the time to close this webinar, but before that, I would also like to thank the BSI team, the internal team that have put together this webinar today. So thank you, and round of applause to you guys. But before we finish, we have 3 poll questions that we would like to ask you, and that will help us to prepare our next webinar and improve or change anything if needed. But before that, thank you very much to all panelists today. Thank you. So the first question is, how did you find today's webinar? Excellent, good, fair. We will give you a few seconds. It's actually good to see that we still have more than 100 participants at the end of it. So I believe that it has been, in a sense, successful. Thank you. A few more seconds.
I think it's excellent. Unfortunately, I cannot choose because I learned a lot from other panelists. I really learned a lot.
Excellent. If we can keep going, and next question. Would you like BSI to contact you for further discussions? Also, as well as part of the Q&A, as I mentioned, we have had more questions, and we will come back to you with the answer to those questions. So thank you as well for asking them. And the last one. What support do you think you may need from BSI for your sustainability goals? Training for employees, standards, roadmap, all of the above. I'm expecting a 16% for sort of like all of it. I think it was part of the questions earlier. We have seen different stages into that journey towards net zero. And if you have any questions, please drop us an email, and we will be in touch with you guys. I believe it's now time to close the poll and close this webinar. So again, thank you very much to all participants and to all the speakers. Really appreciate it, and see you next time on another webinar. Thank you, everyone. Take care.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
All the best.
Good day.
Bye.